pen. Okay, so this is our first lecture that corresponds with Chapter 4. So technically we are in a new unit, okay? So test 1, like we just said a minute ago, is due on Wednesday. Make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to complete that and plenty of time to contact me with questions, because I have a bad habit of falling asleep when I'm watching TV with my husband at night, and so by like 9:15 at night, I'm asleep. You know, he's like nudging me, wake up, go upstairs, you're snoring, I can't, I can't finish the TV show. I'm like, okay. And so I will not see it if you text me like after 8 o'clock or whenever we start watching a TV show, because I will probably be asleep before, and then awake the next morning before I see it, and I'll text you at like 4:30 a.m. and wake you up when I wake up. So anyway, so make sure you give yourself enough time to access that. But this, and for online students, there'll be a picture posted of this because I think it's not coming across very well on the video. But this is my brainchild this morning when I was thinking about, okay, we're starting a new unit. How do I give them a picture to kind of describe what we're talking about today? And so Chapter 4, Chapter 5, and Chapter 6, all 3 of those chapters are in this unit. I'm going to give you the page numbers out of those chapters to read. You don't have to read all of the pages in each of those chapters, but you will have some pages from each of those chapters, 4, 5, and 6, to begin reading now. And let's see, this is week 5 of the semester, so midterm is at the end of week 7, so probably in 2 weeks, it'll feel like 3 weeks from now when the end of week 7 happens. That's when our midterm time is. And so our goal for test 2, which is over this unit's a little shorter than unit 1 was, but our goal for test 2 is to have it due a day or 2 before I have to have your midterm grades posted to make sure that you've got an even number of points, or half the points earned in sociology class by midterm, and you'll have exactly the same number of points to earn between midterm and final exams, okay? So we've got lots of more reaction paper opportunities between now and midterm. I'm going to use 5 as my number, how many I'm going to assume people should have time to have earned 5 reaction paper credits by that time. So I'm going to use 5 reaction papers to average midterm grades. We'll have 2 tests and then this 1 project, the letter to grammar. Okay? All right. So chapter 4 is called social structure, or society and social structure. Like I told you, I left my book at home today, so I can't remember exactly what the title for chapter 4 is. If anybody has it, actually there is a chart on page, I want to say like 46, somewhere around there. Hannah, if you could open it, I'm assuming you're getting your book out. If you could open it to 46 and tell me if that's in chapter 4 or like what the first, it's like on the 2nd or 3rd page of chapter 4, there is a chart with like squares in it instead of all these circles that tries to explain this concept too. What page is that? 98. I was way off. Okay, so we're much farther in the book than I thought. So page 98, the bottom of 98 has a color-coded square-shaped picture of what I'm trying to explain to you here. I've rearranged it kind of with these circles and these hooks on these letters to show you that there are connections. I don't like that picture on the bottom of 98 as much as I would if it was linear like this. That picture on the bottom of 98 has like some of these 3 things uneven with each other visually, and all 3 of these things are equal in society. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me talk about social structure and society. So I will make a list over here of key words that need to be in a good definition of social structure. We already have a definition of society, but we will talk about that also. And then you might recognize, you should recognize some of these words like social institutions. We've already briefly talked about statuses and roles when Mead was talking about role-taking and play as a learning process for children, developing significant others and generalized others. And then social groups, this might be a new concept for chapter 4, whereas some of these have at least a little bit of review components to them. So let's talk about social structure. I hope that you can see from this picture that I've drawn that all of these different parts that I've circled and overlapped circles, all of them are part of social structure. So some key words that have to be in a good definition of social structure is that it is a complex framework or a complex organization. A complex blueprint. You can use any of those words that are kind of synonyms for structure. It's a complex framework, complex blueprint, complex, what was the other one I just said? Use any of those words as a synonym for structure here. So social structure is it's macro scale. This complex framework is macro scale. And the framework consists of these three things that I have in these like egg-shaped circles here. The three things are social institutions, statuses, and roles. Notice this is two things, but we will talk about how they always go together. You can't have a status without a role and vice versa. So when you say statuses and roles, think of it as one part of the complex framework that we call social structure, okay? So here's one part, here's two parts, and then social groups. Okay, this isn't quite, don't quite have a complete list of key words yet for a definition. We know maybe what it is, but we don't really know from this list of keywords what it does for us, okay? So social structure is a complex framework of macro scale things. These three things specifically are social institutions, statuses and roles, social groups, and it provides us with a network of norms. It provides us with an organized path through life, okay? So it gives us a system of norms. It gives us a pathway, a guided path through life. I didn't put the Maze Runner movies on the letter for Granny assignment, did I?
No.
I didn't, yeah. I couldn't remember. I remember trying to decide whether I wanted to put the Maze Runner movies. I could have, but I wanted to save them for this really because what is a maze? What's a maze? Like what do the Maze Runner people have to do?
Get through the
Yeah, get through it. Let's use that as a metaphor for life. Is every path in the maze doable, or do they have to turn around? Is there danger, or maybe there's a brick wall and you just can't go down that path because it's just not available to you? It looks like there's a path there, but social structure is no, it's making a decision for me. I can't go down that path that I thought I wanted to go down because social structure doesn't allow it. So think of this social structure as a maze. This complex framework is like a maze. It only works within the rules that guide it. It only works within the rules that fit it. So you might want to turn right, but there might be a brick wall. You might want to turn left, but there might be danger or something that's not allowed down that path, right? There's usually only one or two paths that's available in a maze to get out safely. So think about that metaphor of society, which is made up of people who share the same governance in the same geographic area. So society is made up of people. Social structure is made up of the maze, the pathways that you, or the matrix, like those old movies, programming behind life. You're only allowed to have certain kind of pathways. Okay, so there's a lot of movie metaphors we can use to try to understand this. Social structure is that matrix that the Matrix movie talked about. Social structure is the maze that the Maze Runner people have to deal with, right? So it's a complex framework that establishes like a path that we have to take in life. We talked about social facts in the first unit, and there's some questions on our test about social facts. What are social facts? You can look in your notes. Social facts. Remember when we were discussing that term, we said facts don't mean truth here necessarily. They mean reality. Very good to remember that. Social facts are, who's got it?
There are pattern ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that exist on the micro level and controlled individual behavior to a certain extent on the micro level.
Yes, so I'm going to correct one word. I think you just had a slip with when you said micro twice, and one of those times needs to be macro. Okay, yes. Yes, so verbatim, you're correct. So social facts are pattern ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that exist on the macro scale, okay? We're talking about social structure being on the macro scale. And social facts, patterned ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that exist on the macro scale and that have effect on, I can't remember exactly the rest of the sentence, but they affect our behavior on the micro scale, okay? So social structure starts, this complex framework starts on the macro scale. It's composed of all of these different things that exist on the macro scale. System of norms that kind of bridges the macro scale and the micro scale, and it's a pathway through life for individuals on the micro scale. So we have finished our loop. Social structure is a loop that, in order to understand it completely, you must be aware that the complex framework exists on the macro scale, but you and I live our lives in the micro scale life experience realm. But social structure affects us because it sets our pathway through life, it establishes the norms that we're going to have peer pressure to follow, right? We're going to have social pressure to follow. That social pressure is really the reason you're in college to begin with. It's because our social structure is set up so that the economy, one of these social institutions I have linked over here, it's kind of tiny, but this word is econ. The economy is a social institution, and our social structure links the education system with the job that you're going to get in the economy. So is that why you're here in college right now and not out doing something else? Yeah. Not because y'all just love getting up for an 8 o'clock in the morning class on Mondays. No. You're supposed to say, yes, we do. That's what you're supposed to say. Yeah, sure. That's what you're supposed to tell your teacher. Let's see. Okay, no extra credit. Okay, so anyway, social structure is macro level, but look, it's micro level too. Social facts are macro level, but look, they're micro level too, because they exist on the large scale. But you and I go on our pathway through life on this micro scale, but all of these things up here affect us. We're part of society as a whole. We might not feel like we're an important part of society as an individual, but we are. Society is made up of individuals who respond to social structure. And these are the components of social structure. We've talked about before, family, education system, religion, economy. Have we talked about religion as a social institution, or was that, I can't remember what we talked about back in week 1. It seems like so long ago, right? You'd have to flip back in your notes to find it. But that's why I drew this picture on the board. It's complex framework, right? With all these hooks and loops and links in a chain. At least that's how I envision it in my mind. These are supposed to be like links in chains. Okay, so another thing, well, questions. Questions so far. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 are specifically about either social structure in general. Well, Chapter 4 is about a lot of this picture of social structure, and then Chapter 5 really gets deeper into social groups and our micro-level behavior over here in social groups. Let me actually show down here below this kind of like a transition line between this macro scale and micro scale. It's not an abrupt hop. It's kind of like This exists in the macro scale. Social institutions are on the macro level in society. Statuses and roles are kind of in between. They're in between, I'll put like a bar right here where macro is on this side and micro is on this side. And social groups really are where we live out our daily life experiences in social groups. Statuses and roles has an element of both macro and micro level, especially when you're dealing with master status that we'll talk about maybe before the end of class today. We will get to master status. But let's talk about why each of these things are linked like they are. These loops that I've got drawn on the board, that's where the circles overlap. So these things do not exist isolated from each other. That chart on the bottom of page 98 kind of might lead somebody to believe that these things are isolated from each other or one of them is more important than the next. They're not. They're all equally important and they're all overlapping. Okay, so let's talk about social institutions really quick. You should have a definition of this someplace in your notes in chapter 1, but let's get a new one now. I'm not going to redefine it or give you a new one. Sorry, I misspoke. We're going to write it over again now, is what I mean. My words might not be identical to what we said in chapter 1 when you have a definition, but it should mean exactly the same thing when you read it, okay? So, a social institution is on what level?
Macro.
It's on a macro level. So, social institutions are macro level methods society has for taking care of the needs a population has. There's a good working definition of what a social institution is. It's a method for taking care of social needs. I recall that when we were talking about this the first time through, we focused on the education system a lot. So I've got that as one of the little links in this chain, the education system. So education system is a macro part of society. What kind of need does the education system fill for society in the USA? The education system. What kind of need does the education system fulfill or take care of for society in the US?
Like structure their children, I guess? Like their minds?
That's part of it, yes. That's part of it. The education system occupies children so that it frees up their parents for other things. But there's a more important first kind of in the list job that the education system does for society in the USA. Yes, ma'am. Did you have your hand up? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Anybody?
It shows kids.
It does?
Go on if you're talking.
Yes, it gives kids in general a structure that they might not get from their family. But Logan, what were you going to say? And then I'll tell everybody what's on my mind.
I was just going to say that it fulfills the need to learn basic information about our country and to learn information.
The learning process, basic information about our country, basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. He hit the nail on the head. That's the main purpose the education system serves in USA social structure as a social institution. And here's why. Let me kind of drag you into this if you're like, oh, okay. So in the United States, is there a norm that people in general, citizens and residents in general, should have a certain level of education? Is there a social expectation? I see bunches of people shaking their heads. There's a social expectation. Listen to me talking in the macro scale. Society has this expectation that residents and citizens will have, what is this basic standard level of education that the norm is in the USA? High school. Right? High school. Now, does every resident and citizen have a high school education? No, but those are the exceptions to the rule. And in sociology, remember, we're looking at trends across the board rather than the exceptions to the rule. So the education system is an organized method for making sure that citizens and residents have a high school diploma, high school equivalency, high school level knowledge. College is not a requirement. There isn't a truant officer or that position, that job spot in society for not going to college. Have y'all ever heard of a truant officer before?
Nope.
What's a truant officer?
You missed so many days in school.
In what school? College?
Public.
Not college, but yes, your high school or lower. Yes, because there are laws in place. I don't have the government as a little bubble here, but we can put government here. It certainly is a social institution. There are laws that require people of a certain age get schooling. Now, does it have to be a public school? You said public school, Veronica. Does it have to be public?
No.
Doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be private. It can be homeschool, right? There's a variety of different ways that the education system allows for that norm to be reached. But the education system is a social institution that's an organized method for transmitting knowledge. It also occupies children's time. It gives them other lessons about respect for authority, some of the things that Max mentioned, and Veronica, did you also mention occupying children's time? So yes, there are some secondary things that it does for society. The primary thing that it does is it takes care of the need for a basic education level among citizens and residents. So any of these things that I have as bubbles here having to do with social institutions, all of them will have, you will be able to analyze them in a way to look at on the macro scale, what method, what norm, what need does it fill for the population of a society. People make up the population, but society in general has needs to continue either growth or maintenance into the future. Questions? We're good? Okay. I don't know that we talked about religion as a social institution yet. Did we? Okay, it is. I didn't think we had, so let's talk about it really quick since I put it up here. Religion is a social institution. Religion is a macro level method that fills needs for a population. Okay? And let's talk about how. Let's talk about in what way. So first of all, in the United States, do we have to have a religion that we belong to or that we practice? No. There are in some countries, there are laws that say this is the dominant religion, this is the predominant religion, and the expectation is that you'll be in this religion in some places in the world. The United States is not like that. We have a separation of what we call church and state. It means the government cannot mandate that you are one religion over another or any religion at all. Yet, in sociology, we look at religion as a social institution because it is a motivator for people to follow norms in a society. It is the foundation where most norms in a society come from. There are three types of norms. What are they? Folkways, mores, and laws. That second one, mores, what did we say that was based on?
Like your
Morality, exactly. Where does a system of morality come from?
Usually religion.
Usually religion. So religion has a huge connection to what the norms are in a culture to begin with, okay? If we lived in Israel, anybody know what the dominant religion is in Israel?
Judaism.
Judaism. And therefore, anybody know what like the prayer day of the week is on the calendar?
Saturday.
Saturday, that's correct. Saturday is the holy day on the Jewish calendar. So even if you went into Hallmark and bought a wall calendar to hang someplace in your house, you would see that the days of the week start like one day shifted from what you think is normal. Because in the US, it starts on a certain day, That day is Sunday, right? And why Sunday? Is there a connection between the week starting on Sunday and the expected religion in the United States? What's the dominant religion in the United States? Christianity. What's the prayer day in Christianity? Sunday. Right? So it wasn't an accident that the founders of Chick-fil-A closed it on Sunday, right? It's not an accident that you cannot go renew your driver's license in person on Sunday, right? It's not an accident that the courts are closed on Sunday, right? Not in the United States, because even our calendar, just like in Israel or Saudi Arabia, does anybody know the dominant religion in Saudi Arabia? Islam. Anybody know the prayer day in Islam?
Isn't it
It's Friday. So you have yet another, and also, by the way, in Islam, I will have to ask Siri exactly what year it is, but they're not in the year 2020. Even the year 2020, the way we are counting, is a Christian way of counting.
I don't think the Jews are in 2020 either.
No, the Jewish calendar is not in 2020 either. And somebody ask Siri really quick. I think Veronica, ask what year it is in the Jewish calendar, and somebody else ask what year it is on the Muslim calendar. I think it's like 1612 or something like that on the Muslim calendar, and it's going to be 6,000 something on the Jewish calendar, I think. So anyway, these different concepts of time are also affected by religion. Right? So it's not just mores, the idea of what is morally correct or morally incorrect in a society. It's even, what is it? 5,000 what?
780?
Okay, so in the Jewish calendar it's 5,780, the year 5,780. And what is it?
Muslim is 1441.
It's 1441. Okay, I was way off with both. But okay, for the year 1441. Okay, or the year 2020, depending upon where you happen to be standing in the world, right? So even those concepts of time are linked to religion, not only that morality idea, mores, that second type of norms that we have in society, because we see the word norms over here, but norms have three parts, right? And pretty much all of them, there we go, that marker works. Pretty much all of them come from religion in some kind of way. So religion is a social institution that gives us purpose in life. It gives us motivation to follow society's norms. In a country like ours that does not require that people are a certain religion, you still need motivation to follow society's norms. So if in people's minds they can see a clear link between the behavior of holding a door open for a lady and Christianity, then it's easier to follow that social custom. It's easier to follow that norm. Does that make sense? Okay. So, a lot of times these macro level methods, here's this definition for social institutions, a lot of times this is where norms come from. Norms and customs, a lot of the parts of culture, norms, customs come from social institutions. In my mind, this was such a pretty picture when I was coming up with it this morning, what I was going to draw for y'all for school. And now the more I write on it, the more jumbled up it looks. But let me see if I can get another picture of it. You might need to do it for me again. Yeah, would you take a picture of it for me again? If you don't mind being on YouTube for a moment. Yes, please, if you can. And then text me that picture, please, so I can post it. Thank you. Okay. So, make sure you have more than just this in your notes, because this is kind of chopped up, right? This is kind of segmented into major concepts And so you need some explanation about social institutions. We already have a very thorough explanation from back. It was probably week 1. It was definitely not after like the first class meeting of week 2. It was sometime in there in your notes when we first started talking about social institutions. So you have more details about it back in those notes. So it would be a good idea for you to give yourself a little, make a little note to yourself in the margin that you can find out more about social institutions by looking at your chapter 1 notes. Because here's the expectation. The expectation is I introduced it to you in chapter 1. Here in chapter 4, we're still talking about social institutions, but we're talking about it in more complex ways, and therefore you need to have a more thorough, or let me say deeper, understanding of what social institutions are. That will be the expectation for our next test. Okay, questions? Okay, I'm going to erase this because I need to talk about, for the rest of the class today, we will talk about statuses and roles, and then on Wednesday, during Wednesday's class, we will talk about social groups, and that's when we'll bridge between chapter 4 and chapter 5, because they both have sections on this. And then chapter 6 will be next week. Okay, look for the page numbers of those chapters when I post them in Blackboard later, after I get my hands on my book, so I can give you accurate page numbers. Okay. Okay, so this part of the lecture is still about social structure. We're just going to look at that middle bubble more carefully. We're going to look at that statuses and roles section of our picture and get to the bottom of what that is. How does it link? You saw, or you should have drawn in your notes, that macroscale is over here on the social institution side, and by the time we get to statuses and roles, we've got kind of an overlap of macro and micro components in statuses and roles. Okay, so statuses and roles, they always go together. You will never have a status without a role that goes with it. Okay? Statuses are positions in society. Okay? Positions that exist in society. Here is your concept, your macro scale part of this concept. Society in general is where the concept of your position is created. So this is the macro scale side of statuses and roles. The definition of role, this is the part that you play regarding your status. It's the duties that you have because of the status that you occupy. Roles are duties. They are behaviors that are expected of a status. So statuses are positions that you hold in society. Society determines what those positions are. From the social institutions that exist, like family, we get statuses like mom, dad, sister, brother, grandma, etc. Keep on going, right? Those are positions in society. Let's use mom as an example. Mom. That's a position in society. Does society also impose expected duties, expected behaviors, a part that that person whose name is mom is supposed to play on a daily basis? Such as housework? Housework, kids, yes, just the word mom in general implies there are kids, right? What else? And this word implies how many different duties that we could start to mention. In regard to kids, somebody has to teach you how to brush and floss your own teeth, and guess who usually gets to do that role before you know how to do it yourself? Mom or dad, right? Caregiver in general. Somebody has to give you nutritious food and teach you those kinds of habits. Who gets to do that? Usually mom. Somebody has to grocery shop, usually parent in general, right? Mom specifically is what we're using here. Not always mom, we're just using mom as an example. So think about all of those duties, all those behaviors that society expects a person to do, so this affects your microscale daily life. Your mom wakes up not thinking about herself only. She thinks about her duties associated with mom, and society imposes those duties on her. Society does. One status I know about you is student. That's a position you are holding in society right now. You are not holding the position of a career employee. You're not holding the position of college graduate. Not yet. You're holding the position of student. What are the expected duties? What's the part you have to play because your position, your status is student? Keep up grades. Keep grades up. And you know what? We don't have to keep them up to A's, but we need a C status in order to be an average expected student, right? Keep up grades. Do what? Yeah, depending upon what your program is, you might need, yes, your program might have more rigorous expectations than just being a C student, but hey, C's are what we shoot for as a minimum to pass, right? Okay? What else does a student have to do? Attend, yes. Attend, what about deadlines? Like 6 a.m. when the link to submit the letter to Granny went away, right? So deadlines, you have to meet deadlines, you have to study, right? You have to come to class, you have to do all of these things. Are you going to have to always do those things in your life? No, you'll pass out of this, you will transition out, I should say, of this role of student. Your goal here is to graduate. There's another expectation. Do you notice that people around you in your daily life have that expectation? When are you going to graduate? What program have you chosen? Right? Yes. So there's an expectation of student also. You're not going to stay a student forever. That's the social expectation. Okay. What social institution does this status come from? What social institution is it directly linked to?
Education.
The education system. So this is a macro level kind of position in society that comes from a macro level social institution that all of us are expected to participate in our lifetime. So we get this status of student. The duties that we have listed here for mom or for, well, what social institution is mom linked to? Family. Family is a social institution, right? So you need to clearly see these links. That's why I drew the picture the way I drew the picture with these circles overlapping, because we're talking about statuses and roles now, but they don't exist in a bubble by themselves. They come from social institutions. And when we get to the social groups discussion, you will see that these bridge the gap into social groups also. Okay? So, I was going to ask you a question about this, but I forgot what it is, so I'll have to wait. Any questions from you about this? Okay. What about this example? I'm going to put this up as an example for status, but you tell me whether it is or not. And the way that you can decide whether it is or not is by thinking about whether there are specific duties and expectations for this particular kind of person in society that differ from somebody else. Okay? So, is 10-year-old a status? Is 35-year-old a status?
Yeah.
You might be right. You might be right with your yes, but I'm going to need some more information with yes. Because if it's a yes, does it have to have a role that goes with it? Yes, because every status has a role.
Well,
So then tell me then, what kind of duties, expected behaviors, what kind of part does a 10-year-old play?
a 10-year-old, well,
Games?
Clean the house.
Games, chores?
Do their homework.
Chores,
Obedience.
homework?
they need to obey their parents.
They need to obey a higher authority. Yeah? Is this a good list? Oh, we've got the ideal description of a 10-year-old here, right? Nobody said naughty. Nobody said kick their sister. Nobody said any of those things, right? But 10-year-olds, okay, they're going to focus on games, they're going to focus on chores, they're going to focus on school, they're going to focus on following other people's orders.
They're going to question, too.
They're going to question also. They're going to question,
Why?
and they're going to, yes, they're like we learned in those, like we learned when we were studying the cognitive development theory, they're going to ask, why everything, right? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that, right? So in their development, they are learning about their larger position in society, right? They're learning about that generalized other and their link as an individual to larger society. They don't maybe know that already. In comparison, a 35-year-old, what would be some of the expected behaviors? Just give me a similar list. What is this person going to do that's different than the 10-year-old?
Go to work.
So we still have, there was work over here to do, but it's different. So do I need to put chores and homework or?
No, it's
So work at like a career is what we mean here. So career work. Bills. Oh, yes, amen, honey. I just never stop. Yes, so cook their own food, take care of their own like needs.
If they have kids.
Oh yes, maybe by 35, does society have an expectation that probably you would transition to that parent expectation? That's a good observation. Maybe being a parent, which is actually another status, is something by the time you are 35 years old and that 35-year-old age is ascribed to you, maybe the expectation is that you're going to have another position in society, another status that is achieved called a parent.
Not all of them are parents.
Not all, but there is an expectation. There's an expectation that if you're going to participate in normal society, you will have family membership at this point, in which you have transitioned from the child role to the parent role. How else is society going to continue? Society going to continue without people having babies to be another generation of society moving forward? No. So there is an expectation. Will this be across the board? Every 35-year-old is a parent? No. But the social expectation is you will contribute and do your part, and that is 2.1 children per family to keep the population stable. The USA. Okay? So, I don't know if any of you noticed that I sneaked in two words that were in our picture that I erased from a minute ago. Two words that were overlapping with our circle that had statuses and roles in it, and that is ascribed and achieved. I said that the 35-year-old, by the time you are ascribed the status of 35, there might be some expectations that you have different achieved statuses, like career worker, employee, parent, we even have on the list specifically by name. So So let's look at these classifications of ascribed versus achieved statuses. Ascribed status, achieved status. What does the word ascribed mean? Have y'all heard that word before?
Given to you?
It's given to you. Ascribed is given without effort on your part. There's no effort. You are given a status. You do not have to be a willing participant. You are given a status. What does the word achieved mean?
You work to get it.
You work to get it. You earn a position in society. You work to get it. You have effort on your part that got you into that place. So the example of ascribed status that I just used a minute ago with the 10-year-old to the 35-year-old, that ascribed status in general is called age. You cannot help or choose what age you are. You cannot help or choose what generation you belong to. You cannot pick or choose what part of history you were born into. You wish you'd pick another one besides this one? Yes. So, because you can't pick or choose any of those things, your age is your age, and you will be a teenager when you're a teenager, and a young adult when you're a young adult, and a middle-aged person when you're a middle-aged person, and a senior citizen when you're a senior citizen, and there's no amount of plastic surgery that can alter your birth certificate to say how old you are, right? So your age is fixed. It is given to you. Knowing that age is an example of ascribed status, and we know that it's a status because you just told me there's different social expectations for a 10-year-old than there is for a 35-year-old.
Would your gender also go for
How about gender? And let's use the word gender. We have a chapter later on. It's going to be after midterm for sure. We have a chapter later on that covers the idea of sex and gender. These words are used incorrectly in modern language, just casual language. But gender is on our list on page 98. Your gender is an ascribed status because society has norms for what the gender roles are in society. Society has norms. Society creates concept of gender, pardon me, the concept of gender, and we fit or don't fit into the expected behaviors of the categories of gender that exist in a society. Okay? Really, more clear to understand is your sex category. Your sex category is ascribed, and your gender is linked to your sex category. We will get into a lot of depth into this conversation. I think it's chapter 9 or something like that. Okay? Okay, what else goes on this list? Your race. I was about to write it when you said it, yes. Your racial category is also defined by the society that you're in. Race is a socially defined category. It's not biological at all. But according to the norms that exist in society, so we're still seeing this link between macro level and the you and me level. Society has expectations, it has rules about certain things. And race is one of those things that's defined by society, so we're born into a particular category. And ascribed status, you can be born into it or given it later on in life without any effort of your own. And what is another one for somebody who has their textbook and they can look? There are some examples on that chart on page 98. There's one more listed we don't have here.
Social
Yes.
I was gonna say poverty and rich, but I was wrong.
Your social class. Well, you're not wrong if you wanted to say poverty or wealth, because your economic status is something that you inherit from the people you're born to or adopted to.
Well,
Right.
That's only for a limited time.
It doesn't really prove to be true that it's only a limited time.
Well,
Because the norms, remember in the socialization process, it's not correct to say that we learn the norms of society. Instead, it's correct to say that we learn what? What do we learn in our socialization process that takes place on a microscale? Look back at your notes. You learn from the people that you're around from every day, right? Remember the story about the little girl who learned how to cuss really, really well because her family all the time cussed all the time. Is that a norm, an expected behavior for a 4-year-old in society? No. So in your socialization process, you learn from the people that you're around every single day. So if you grow up in poverty, you are learning a particular lifestyle. You're learning a particular habit of eating. You're learning a particular habit of entertainment. You're learning a particular type of housing that you live in. You are learning and becoming accustomed to those kinds of things. You're learning a particular type of money management. If you've got it, you've got a bill that needs to be paid. If you got $5 extra after all the bills are paid, that's what Little Caesars costs, right? So you learn from your upbringing, from the people that you're around every day. You learn, and even though, and this is in chapter 7, I think it is, Logan, you said it doesn't have to be fixed. You're right. It doesn't have to be fixed in theory. We don't have, the faction system like in Divergent, right? We don't have that where I'm going to label you and you have to stick there the rest of your life. We don't have that concept in our society. But we do have a social structure that is set up in a certain way that guides our behavior, that creates a matrix, creates a maze that we have to navigate through. And the reason social class is on that list in chapter 4, page 98, I think was the page, is because we learn in our socialization process from the people that we're around daily. And it's hard to shed those kind of intimate daily habits that we learn early on through the majority of our young life. It's hard to shed that knowledge, those habits, that expectation for how you're going to live your daily lives. It's an interesting concept. We won't really go into it any more in depth than just this in chapter 4 and 5. But in chapter 7, I think it is, in 7 we'll talk about social inequality and how it can be learned behavior. Okay? So those are some examples of ascribed statuses. Of course, there's always a role that goes with status, and so age, as we pointed out, a 10-year-old has a different social expectation than a 35-year-old. Your gender, man, woman, unmarried man, widow, widower, all of these are gender words that have different social expectations associated with them, right? Unmarried woman has behaviors that are perfectly acceptable, that some of which are still going to be fine when she's a married woman, but others of which are not fine anymore after she's a married woman, right? Does that make sense? Hello? Okay. Okay. Our sex category, I've already talked about how it overlaps with some of other things, like the word parent does not have our sex category overlapped. But if we break the word parent down into sexes, we've got mom and dad, and there's different social expectations for that, right? Race, society defines the different social expectations. Social class, society defines the different social expectations. Okay? Ascribed statuses. Achieved status, on the other hand, are what? Examples is what I'm asking you for.
A job.
Status, your occupation. So employee is an achieved status. Parent is and achieved status. What? I heard somebody else say. Your education level is your achieved status. What else? Do what? Yes, the income level. Income level is your achieved status. Okay, and I put the word employee up here. I think it was Hannah who gave me all of these, but in your textbook you'll see the word occupation. I think you said that, whoever told me that. You said occupation. Yes, okay. So, these achieved statuses, your status as an employee, or your occupation level, your education level, and your income level make up, together with all these three, 1, 2, and 3, all of these together make up something called your socioeconomic status. Your socioeconomic status. All three of these together. We will get a thorough definition of socioeconomic status in Chapter 7, but these achieved statuses that are listed on in Chapter 4, these three particular achieved statuses make up a larger status. This one means it's a combination of these three. And this is very important in a place like the USA, your socioeconomic status. It's different than social class, but it has to do with, does society have a lot of respect for your position or not? Well, not all occupations. I'm pointing at occupation here, and I'm asking the question, does society have a whole lot of respect for your occupation? There's tons of occupations that don't have a whole lot of social respect.
Like janitor.
Okay, janitor, custodian, any of those kinds of jobs, those are occupations, permanent occupations that some people get. And typically, does that have a whole lot of social prestige or respect associated with it? But that's an occupation.
One that probably would have a lot of respect would be something in the STEM field. Maybe
Okay,
like
right now, the areas of the STEM field are really being crammed down everybody's throat, right? Bloomberg was talking about this on TV the other day, about, technical education and engineering. Those kinds of occupations have a lot of social respect associated with them right now. Yeah, your education level. What kind of education level do you need to be a janitor? Do you need to be an engineer, or as you mentioned, doctor or lawyer or something, right? So the higher the education level typically is linked directly to the higher occupation that you can achieve. Listen to me throwing in vocabulary words, right? And does your income matter in our society?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Your income matters. And the education level that you get, the higher it is, the understanding is, the norms of society, the social structure, the shape of society that we have to deal with, the higher your education level, the better, I'm going to put air quotes, better your occupation level is. And what makes occupation better? Not just do we respect the title, but how many digits a year are you making? Am I right? Is that why you're here with me right now, participating in this achieved status? Don't lie, it is, right? Yeah, so we're here because society says to get the occupation you want, you have to have a certain level of this. It's all linked. It's called socioeconomic status. Questions or comments before we talk about our last type of status today? We're good? Okay, let's talk about the status that in my picture, I had it listed really big, so I'm going to list it really big again on the board now. Master status. It has the word status in it, so we know it's a position that exists in society. It's a macroscale position that exists in society. Our master status is the most important position in society that we hold. I'm going to make very controversial, or maybe controversial is not the word. Maybe you're going to want to argue with me when I make this statement, and arguing would be great. But let me make this statement. Society. Is that macro level or micro level? Macro. Society decides individuals' master status. Not the individual. Huh?
But shouldn't.
Sounded like Scooby-Doo was in my class. Huh?
You're not gonna hire yourself.
Yeah,
Sort
but
of a
maybe what
mixture.
type of way do you mean that, Miss?
Macro level society. Norms come from society, right? Norms come from social institutions on a macro level. Our statuses come from social institutions on a macro level. Some statuses are ascribed to us. They're given to us without our effort. They're given to us without any acceptance at all. We're born into them. Those are ascribed statuses. A master status, I put this statement here because this is a very complex idea, master status, and we are not in charge of it. We're not in charge of it.
I think it's a bit of a mixture of the two.
Typically,
Like, yes,
there's a little bit of a mixture because, for instance, occupation,
For example, I know a lot of people get jobs based on who
just a
they
second, occupation, education level, and what was the last one?
know.
Income. These make up socioeconomic status. Typically, in a country like the US, this is seen as master status number 1 for ascribed status males. When I say breadwinner, am I talking about mom or dad? Really? How? There's many more mamas out there
Yep.
heading single-parent households than
But
daddies.
society-
But still, society on a macro scale, when we say the position breadwinner, who do we think of first? Even y'all who are 20, 30 years younger than I am, still today, when I say breadwinner, without hesitation, my classes say the man, dad, the husband, male status words. However, it's not always like that, but of course, individual examples go against this trend. But the trend still is, we all think, breadwinner, daddy. A master status for a woman is, what would you say? Caretaker, mother. Even if I want my status, even if I am participating in this, society tends, the trend is across the board, society tends to see the mother status as the primary function that a female serves in society.
I'm sorry. It was.
Was it another bug emergency? Oh my goodness, they were supposed to fumigate.
What was it this time?
It's flat. Whatever it was, it's flat now. It's a flat bug. Thank you for getting rid of it. Okay, so let's get back to this. I told you this was going to be, is this controversial? Should I use that word?
Yes.
It's not controversial. You don't think so? Some, maybe a little. So, so let's look at this for just a
If
second.
you put it that way, it is because not all the time the males, like sometimes there are stay-at-home dads who.
We're not,
Take care of it.
yeah, we're not talking about, remember, look at this. See this word status? And see this word status over here? Is this the micro scale part or the macro scale part of the statuses and roles?
Macro?
Macro. This is the macro scale part of statuses and roles. So you are correct. Sometimes dad is a stay-at-home dad, right? But when I ask you to fill in the blank with stay-at-home, oh, like it's not part of the storybook that a kindergarten teacher is reading to the kindergarten class right now. It's not part of that yet. So in the socialization process, even as different as your generation is from mine, when I say stay at home, fill in the blank, you want to say mom, because that's the word. That's just the word that exists in our society. Are there some stay-at-home dads? It just doesn't even come to the mouth as easy to say that, right? However, in the workplace, true story, I've got like 2 minutes left. True story, student of mine, I'm using a microscale example to demonstrate a macroscale process, okay? Student of mine is a veteran who is on the GI Bill getting his education now. His wife is the breadwinner for the household. They have 5 kids. He's the stay-at-home dad and student. That's very unusual for the expected household. 5 kids. He's the one who's the contact. His name is not really Joe, but I'm going to use Joe because it's a guy's name, right? So his name is on the school contact information, like the school nurse, who's your contact person, what's the phone number for this person. So his name is on there for each of his 5 kids, and he said every single time he was laughing about his personal experiences when we were talking about master status in his class. He was laughing, he said, yeah, because these roles are reversed, he said, in my household. And when one of our kids has to come home because he's sick from school or something, he said every single time, even though his wife's phone number and name is nowhere on any of the contact information, they've checked multiple times with the school, his wife always gets a call at her work to come pick up little Joe or whatever from the school, instead of calling Joe, the dad, to go pick him up from the school. And Joe said, this must be why. And he asked the kids, what do they ask you? What's my mama's phone number? They'll ask the kids, what's my mama's phone number? And they give it to her when the guy's name is clearly the one. Now here's one solitary microscale example, but we can look at many, like we said with symbolic interactionism, we can look at interaction and communication on the micro scale and take a collection of that, a wide collection of that across society, and learn a lot of things about macro scale social expectations from the wide collection of micro scale examples that give us evidence of that. What do you think? Okay, so you got a lot to talk about in a reaction paper this week. If you want to write a reaction paper this week, you cannot write about something that's on test 1. Test 1 is technically over, even though the due date hasn't passed yet. Write about these concepts for this week if you're going to write a paper. Okay? I will see you later. Stop this. Let's see. Bye, online students.